Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for joining. My name is Benjamin Hoyne. I am the Policy Director here at Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. We're thrilled to have you today. Before we start, I want to do a brief land acknowledgement and remind ourselves we gathered on unceded land of Indigenous people. I am coming to you from Richmond, Virginia, land of the Powhatan and Chickahominy. And if you're unsure of what land you're on, whose land you're on, you can certainly visit nativeland.ca to find out. Today is a special episode of EJ Now. It is our first show of the new year, and we have the General Assembly right around the corner. And we are thrilled to discuss the priority legislation for Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, VAIPL, which is our Healthy Communities Bill. And we have some wonderful experts to discuss the bill here that I will introduce momentarily. Just to give you a little bit of context, every 5 years, local governments in Virginia are required to prepare a comprehensive plan. This has taken place since the 1970s with some updates along the way. And the comprehensive plan it comes from the Virginia General Assembly. And so over the last few years, Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, along with legislative champions such as Delegate Shelly Simonds here, and Karen Campblin and other allies have been pursuing legislation to allow localities to kind of consider environmental health impacts in their comprehensive planning. And we will be attempting to pass that legislation once again next week, once the General Assembly kicks off here on Wednesday, January 10th. So with that precursor, just want to introduce our guests. First, let me start with Delegate Shelly Simonds. In 2012, she was first elected to the school board representing Newport News. She's been a longtime advocate, longtime volunteer with the League of Conservation Voters, advocating for clean energy for almost 20 years. And also, again, helping out with schools in the public school system in Newport News. She ran for the House of Delegates first time famously in 2017, where she actually tied, which really leads to the lesson that every vote counts. Make sure you know that last year, this year, next year, and moving forward, every vote counts. And then finally was elected to the House of Delegates in 2019, and we've been thrilled to work with her over the many years. So that is Delegate Shelly Simonds. And then just real quick about Karen Campblin. She is the Environmental Justice Chair for the Virginia chapter of the NAACP. She is also an energy planner and works with it. She's a just energy transition coordinator as well. She's a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. And her practice stems from her belief that creating healthy, livable spaces in tandem with strong consideration of community needs improve social wealth, access, and overall quality of life. So you can certainly see how, or if not yet, you will certainly see how this legislation really relates to Karen's work. So let me turn to Delegate Simonds first. Please feel free to introduce yourself a bit more if there's a key piece that I neglected to mention, but also just wanted to kind of ask you to kind of talk about this bill, like why kind of its legislative path, what brought you to introduce this bill a few years ago? Why is this legislation important to you?
I have been interested in environmental justice for a really long time. The first time I ever walked into the General Assembly was as an activist with the League of Conservation Voters and the Sierra Club. And so these issues are really dear to my heart. Back in 2021, I received a call from Delegate Mark Keem, and he had been working on an omnibus environmental justice bill and needed some help carrying pieces of the legislation and wanted to work with me. He had a lot of expertise in environmental justice at the federal level. And it turns out that Virginia is very far behind in this part of the law. Many of the concepts that are in federal law aren't really expressed fully in Virginia law. So we had a lot of work to do. That omnibus bill had many different considerations, trying to get different agencies in the government to do more environmental justice work, trying to get better disclosure and notification laws at DEQ was another part of the bill. And then the comprehensive planning piece was part of the bill. And Delegate Keem and I worked closely with the EJ Collaborative. And that's one of the ways that Karen and I became friends, is through that really neat group. But that year, the omnibus approach, where we had all these different pieces, didn't pass. It didn't work out. So for the last few sessions, I've been focused on the comprehensive planning piece. I think one of the inspirations for me is that at one point, my sister was asked to be on the comprehensive plan team for the city of Newport News. So I kind of saw her experience going through it. And I think of her because if we have a really good bill that gives citizens tools to look at different aspects of community planning, I think it really empowers people. And somebody like my sister would have been really excited to read this bill. And she would have gone to the city and she would have said, hey, I see that we can take, heat mapping into account. We need to look at the parts of our city where there's excessive heat. So I guess that's kind of my guiding principle. Like, this bill is not for consultants. This is not what it's about. This bill is for citizens to be able to read this bill and say, hey, if I'm on the comprehensive planning team, or I know a citizen, or I'm going to go to the comprehensive planning meeting as a citizen, I can bring up these issues. And now it's in the Code of Virginia that we can consider them. So that's just a little background on how I ended up working on this issue.
Great. Karen, you are a consultant. You're also a planner. You're also the Environmental Justice Chair for the NAACP here in Virginia. There's a lot of hats and a lot of ways that this legislation kind of dovetails into all those. Can you talk a bit about that, and maybe inform us on kind of what the comprehensive planning process is and what localities kind of need to do there?
Yeah, definitely. First, I'll start off with, it's great to be here. Happy New Year, everyone. I think the reason why this bill is so important, and it's such an integral piece in integrating community engagement in the decision-making process, is for a while, we kind of moved away from building communities for the people and was building it just to build it. And with it came a lot of negative impacts that we are experiencing today in the forms of traffic, congestion, pollution, and really just horrible planning in terms of trying to get from one place to another and needing a major arterial road to get there, where there could have been other healthy solutions where bike paths or sidewalks or those types of things were also incorporated into the design. And so what this bill does, it helps to provide resources and methods in which we can rectify the situation. Every 5 to 7 years, municipalities are required to update their comprehensive plan. And what that comprehensive plan is a long-term vision of what the community, it takes account, it does a snapshot, takes into account where we are today, but also, and most importantly, again, is where we want to be. And these are the objectives and strategies that needs to take place to get to a more viable and livable community and sustainable community. And this, like I said, is a very important piece because, one, it highlights how important it is for us to move back to that thought, that lens in which the built environment is supposed to be a healthy environment for the for for the community members. It is important to bring that public engagement back into it. And it's also important to highlight how those long-term goals, looking at cumulative impacts and ensuring that we minimize any type of negative um, results from some of our development and placement of development is minimized and pretty much preferably eliminated.
Delegate Simonds, could you talk a bit about the legislative path that this bill has been on over the last few years? I know you've been patroning it for a bit. We obviously just had an election here in November. Talk a bit about maybe the past legislative path of the legislation, and then maybe what you see is the opportunity for success this year in 2024.
So last year, we had a very good bill from Delegate David Bulova pass, and that made changes to the comprehensive planning process to require resilience be considered. And that bill went through counties, cities, and towns subcommittee. So I suspect that this year, the bill that I'm introducing will also go through counties, cities, and towns. If citizen activists want to help us advocate for this bill, they can talk to their own legislators about it, or they can look at the membership of counties, cities, and towns and maybe email the folks that are on that committee to support the bill. That would be very helpful. In subcommittee, we'll probably have some testimony, I'm hoping, from the NAACP and Karen and Benjamin on this call. And we will take some online testimony as well. You can either be in person or online. And then probably no testimony in the full committee. That's been the practice and custom in recent years. So we'll see if it gets out of our full committee, and then it'll go to the House floor. I don't think that we have this bill in the Senate, or do we?
Do you actually? Yeah, Senator Lamont Bagby has agreed to carry the bill as well.
So we have a version in the Senate.
Yep.
So that's great, because then it will get a really good full hearing in the Senate. And then we have crossover when the bills from the Senate come to the House and vice versa. And I'm really hopeful that we can get it over the finish line. You know, looking back at the bill that was passed last year, I've just been looking at it, and you know, Karen mentioned something about the built landscape, and the comprehensive plan rules right now are really focused on transportation. They're really focused on cars and roads, and really not enough about people and the way people interact with their environment and the way they live. So I just think this bill is going to bring us back to the core of what makes our communities strong. And it's really, really going to help, especially the citizens who are involved in the comprehensive planning process, keep their focus on people's day-to-day lives and keeping people healthy. We know that we have areas of different localities that have more pollution than other areas. We need to be able to address that. The current code doesn't even have the word pollution in the comprehensive planning document. So we need to get that perspective in there, so that this isn't just an exercise in you know, thinking about hard infrastructure and buildings and roads, that this is about people.
Definitely. And that's a great segue. I mean, Karen, as somebody that, you know, has worked on comprehensive plans, what is something that, you know, you can see, like, what's a tangible change or tangible thing that you would, if this legislation were to pass, that you would hope to see put into a comprehensive plan that wouldn't have been there before?
Um, I would say, let's take, for instance, when we were in the COVID lockdown, right? There were opportunities for folks to be able to walk to their grocery store, whereas normally they would drive. Or I'm going to go and visit a friend. I'm going to get in my car, whereas you had the time, you may take your bike. And during that time, a lot of people realized just how unhealthy some of their day-to-day activities were due to the way the infrastructure in their community was set up. And so what I would love to start seeing in our comprehensive plans across the country, not just in Virginia, is that extra consideration of other modes of transportation, and for us to start moving away from an auto-centric planning into a more all-inclusive transportation type of planning. So where our roads are being built, not just for the car, but for a sidewalk, or for the mother or family with a child pram, or, you know, a skateboarder, but somewhere where it's safe for our elderly and our youth to also be able to travel. We go on some of our roads right now and we see our bus stops is basically just a sign. What are ways that we can start thinking and have the tools that will allow for the community members to provide feedback to the decision makers that, hey, this this transit stop is not in the right place. We needed to move to where we need it to be, but we also needed to have the amenities that would make it usable. And more consideration to that last mile kind of planning. That is woefully underfunded and ignored. But that last mile, okay, I get my bus, it gets me to where I need to be, but how do I get to my final destination safely? So having a more step-by-step approach and not just having a bird's eye view of the transportation and how we build our community impacts not just mobility, meaning getting from one place to another, getting our products, getting Amazon to our house or anything like that. It is also the way we build our communities, the way we build our transportation infrastructure impacts our health, as we just discussed, lowering not only pollution and emissions, but also provided more healthy options, walking and biking and those types of things. But it also provides access to, if we were able to accommodate public transportation, for instance, a cheaper form of transportation than only you've got better access to schools, better access to medical services, better access to higher paying jobs. And then again, I always go back to the bookends of who we should be considering, which is the elderly on one side and the youth on the other side. It helps to minimize those social isolations, which is something that even our elderly population is more prone to, experience the ill effects from. So the healthier our communities are, the more that we're going to be able to accommodate all of the different uses and lifestyles of everybody within our community.
Wow, there is so much potential with this legislation.
Yes.
So it's really exciting. Delegate Simonds, back to you. I know you kind of already mentioned a few ways for folks to get involved. Certainly, public testimony will be there. I think your point about contacting local officials, folks that do comprehensive planning, or city council, county board of supervisors, what have you, is a really great approach. Just wanted to touch on a few other things, for legislative specific. You mentioned online testimony. Is that something that we expect to happen again this year? And then also, I know in the past, a lot of legislators do like town halls during the General Assembly, maybe, in a few weeks on a Saturday, or maybe around crossover. What are some other ways for folks to contact their legislators or participate, from their home community, so they don't have to come physically to the Capitol in Richmond?
First, definitely we will be having online testimony. And For morning committees, people should sign up by midnight the night before. For afternoon committees, you should sign up before 12 noon. And you go to iHod Speaks, which is the website that will allow you to join the virtual queue. And maybe somebody could put that on the screen or on the chat. But other ways, I would say emailing about this specific bill, I think would be helpful. The bill number is House Bill 208, so HB 208. And if you send an email to your House member and you say, I heard about this bill, I'm excited about it because of some personal connection that you have. Maybe it's, I would like more electric charging facilities for my vehicle downtown, and I would like that to be part of the comprehensive plan. Please vote yes for Simonds HB 208. Then just to be frank, the legislator might not read it, but the legislative assistant has the ability to log your request into something called iHod. And then when we go and do our research on bills, when we go to vote on bills, it will come up electronically. Comments from citizens will scroll by. So you can actually in real time get the comments on bills. So that's called iHod. So when you write to your legislator, you can always say, this is the bill number, please vote yes. And if you would please make a note of it in your iHod system for the delegate, I would appreciate it. And then we can actually see it before voting. Another way that you can provide testimony that I believe is also facilitated through the iHod Speaks website, there it is, that is written comment, written testimony. And the reason I think written testimony is worthwhile is it will follow the bill into full committee. So let's say we've got 20 people who want to speak on this bill in subcommittee, but maybe there's only time and they're only going to have 4 people online testify, 4 people in person, and then they've got to cut it off and we've got to vote and move on. If you supply some written testimony, that will be in the system. And then when legislators are doing their research for the full committee, they can see everyone's testimony right there. It will come up the way our iHod system is. As we're reading bills, we can see kind of a box on the side with our constituents' concerns, or we can see all the testimony. That's all the written testimony that's been submitted. So I do think it's worth your time to do written testimony. And then even better, the written testimony follows the bill when it goes to the full House floor. So maybe somebody was not on the counties, cities, and towns full committee, but they still want to know more about it. So, it's worthwhile to do the written testimony. The one thing that I think you don't need to do at this point is to call. I think phone calls are the last resort at this point. I think emailing is better, and then taking advantage of the hodspeak.house.virginia.gov is another really good option. Many legislators do have town halls at crossover. I know many will have virtual town halls. That's probably what I will end up doing. But you don't have to wait for the town hall to submit your comments. In fact, the earlier you submit your comments, the better.
Great. Yeah, definitely lots of great info there. Karen, I wanted to turn it back to you. You had mentioned public engagement as part of kind of the community planning process. So similar to public engagement at the legislature, which Delegate Simonds just gone over. But I've heard a few folks mention public engagement as part of the comprehensive planning process. And could you talk about what that looks like and how folks can engage in there, especially if it's to advocate for, more walkability, bikeability, green space, healthier communities? What does that look like for somebody in their local community?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. During the local municipalities would probably send out some information, whether it's through a newsletter or even mailers to the home saying, we're getting ready to review and update our current comprehensive plan. Typically, they'll break it down by chapters. The comprehensive plan have different chapters. It's different amongst municipalities. The larger and more complex the municipality, the more chapters and more detailed it is. But it typically, addresses transportation, waste management, housing, those types of things within the comprehensive plan. But for our case, we're looking at the planning pieces, which would be like your transportation, your land use pieces. And so they will have public engagement meetings where they will go to different community centers and just talk about, this is what we have and this is what we want to move forward to. And it is the community members' responsibility to come in and say, hey, these are the nuances within my communities. These are the nuances within my experience being able to do my day-to-day activities, whether it's my access to work, my kids' school, the supermarket, the place of worship, or what have you. These are my mobility requirements. And most importantly, we can't forget our ADA communities, right? So we have to make sure that everything that we move forward also accommodates those that may have different mobility needs, whether it's wide enough sidewalks to be able to accommodate a wheelchair, or making sure we have elevators or access to something, right? So those are all the things. And it really requires the community member to go to the legislator, to the decision makers, to tell them those nuances. We can look at an aerial and say, this is where the roads are and this is where I'll probably go, but it's the community members that knows. For instance, I actually was in South Carolina and I was doing a walk inventory, and we did that. We looked at the aerial, we looked at where we needed to walk, and we said, this is how we're going to plan our walking inventory. And we had our community meeting and we went through the agenda for the day, and we started our walking plan. And the kids, don't forget the kiddos, the other tail, the bookend, right? They came up and they said, what are you doing? This doesn't make sense. So we said, you know what? All right, you tell us where we need to go. And they led us throughout their communities, show us how you get to school. And the amount of dangerous situations these children went through to get to their school was just, we were shocked at the end. They had to cross a railroad. There was an incline on an unpaved path. They had to cut. It was just horrible, horrible, horrible. So had we not had those kids with us, those future planners with us, we would never have known, because the aerial photography did not indicate those dangers. So you can tell, there's some things that are blatant, like, there's no way they should need to cross over a 4-lane highway that's unsignaled without a crossing guard. Like, that's easy stuff, but it's the nuances I'm talking about. So I would say give some of your decision makers some grace, because they don't have those grassroots block by block details, but also don't assume that they know. And the only way they'll know is through that participation. Now, sometimes those workshops may not be enough. They invite you in at 6 and they kick you out at 7:30, 8, or whenever the community center is going to close, right? Those are just the logistics. But following up, hey, I went to the community meeting. I wanted to know if you got my information. Can you come to my HOA and meet with us and hear more from the folks that weren't able to make it? And even let them know you're having meetings at noon. I am at work and have the community request a nighttime meeting or a weekend meeting and have those interaction. And then I'll close off with, it's not a one-time situation. It is a relationship building, continual process. So once you start talking to them, just follow up, become a subject expert to your decision maker, and be that person that they call. It is a relation building that's going to go through and bring in as many people as you can. Faith-based, thank you so much for this platform. Getting your youth, your elderly, environmental, everybody, business also needs to be there. Everybody needs to be at the table. And then I know I said I was going to conclude it, but I promise I'll conclude it on this one, is that the table is never too large. It can always be expanded, and it should always be expanded.
Great. And I'm really excited about this legislation. I know we do need to wrap up. Delegate Simonds, just want to give you the last word, since you've been the legislative champion for a number of years here.
Well, this has been a great conversation, and I feel that we covered the legal legislative angle, which is making improvements to the comprehensive planning law. But then we also gave everyone information about how exciting it is when your community actually does the comprehensive plan, and how important it is for you to participate when your community does the comprehensive planning process. And I agree so much with Karen. The cities want to right the wrongs of the past, but unless they know, I don't have a sidewalk connecting my community to the community church. I don't have a sidewalk connecting my apartment building to the park right down the road. Unless you bring it to their attention, they don't necessarily map it and put it on the city's planning their infrastructure plan. But they can do it if you come and you make your voice heard at the local level. And my job is to hopefully give you some more tools in your toolbox so that you can go and say, hey, it says right here in the law that electric vehicles need to be considered, or heat, a tree canopy needs to be considered. This is what we're trying to give you so that you can be a better activist in your community.
Great. Well, thank you, Delegate Simonds. Thank you, Karen Campblin. We really appreciate both of you for giving your time and your expertise. Once again, thanks to everybody watching that's joined Virginia Interfaith Power and Light in our weekly program, EJ Now. And we look forward to seeing you at the General Assembly, especially January 17th. We have our Lobby Day, Day for All People. We hope to see you there. You can find information on our website, vaipl.org. And we will see you next week. Take care.